Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the Crow's Nest Railroad. Well, fingers crossed. I'm hoping we can finish up this project today of our engineering or driving car or tender build, whatever you want to call it. So stay tuned. Well, you can see the carcass in the background there. Here's the frame. I actually got a lot of stuff done in between our last episode and this one, so let's take a quick look. One of the things that I've been trying to figure out is where to mount the brake handle mechanism. Basically, it's kind of like on a bicycle where you have a wire and a tube and it runs down and actually squeezes the truck, the brakes on the truck. And I had been planning actually to mount it up on the body, but I've had second thoughts about that. I think what I would really like, if I can work this out, is to have the brake handle actually mounted to the frame. That way I can pull the body on and off without having to disassemble the brake lever. So what I'm hoping is, because, let me move this coffee out of the way here, since these footboards are removable, I can't really mount this down here because it will get into the footboard. So hopefully today we'll be able to get this thing, I'll drill a couple holes in the frame here, and I can get this thing mounted up just forward enough to allow me to remove the footboards, and then the brake wire can run back. And I think what I'm going to do is change this up, and I'm going to run the brake wire to the back truck instead of the front truck. But more on that later. As far as the body itself, you can see I've gotten all 2,000 rivets in. Actually, it's just about 100 or so. All the rivets are put in, all the trim is done, everything is sanded, and I actually put 2 coats of an exterior spar varnish on the inside. That's doing the final stages of drying right now. And then underneath, I like to put an exterior paint underneath because there could be some things that will splash up from the wheels and grease or a little bit of mud or whatever. So I always like to coat the bottoms of these wooden carcasses with an exterior grade paint. I know probably many of you actually don't use wood when you're messing with train construction, but I'm kind of a woodworking guy, not really a metal guy, so I just don't have the equipment or the knowledge to build really complete metal framework, rolling stock, or even locomotives. So you got to go with what you know, right? And so I'm very familiar with cutting wood, so that's my medium of choice. So what do we have to do today? All right, first I want to tape off this inside, and I want to get some primer sprayed on the outside. So let's get busy with that. And it's a sandable primer. This is my first time trying this Bondo filler primer. The stuff I usually use wasn't on the shelf and couldn't get it, but they did have this, so I'm going to give this a try. Basically, this is a wood surface, and I want a primer that I can sand smooth to give more of a metallically smooth finish rather than a lot of wood grain showing through. So let me spray this and I'll catch you on the other side. I tried as best I could to tape everything off on the inside. I'd rather not have the paint in there, but you know, these spray cans, the overspray seems to go everywhere. I mean, it even gets in your pockets. So see you in a couple of minutes. Okay, we got a coat of sanding primer on, and it's probably obvious, but this type of primer, sanding is mandatory. It's not sanding optional, because it's going to fill the grain in and you're going to get tons of residue from the sanding. So every inch needs to be sanded. I think I mentioned before that I decided not to mount this brake lever up on the body, but mount it to the frame. So I had to do a little bit of metal work. I had to drill some holes and put some little spacing collars on here to get this out away from the body a little bit. And you'll notice it's got a little bit of an angle. Well, maybe you can't tell on camera, but this section here is not completely vertical. It's actually tilted back a few degrees. And that's because I was worried that perhaps this handle on my sharp turns would become too close to the locomotive in front. So just as a precaution, I tilted this back just to give a little more verticality to this handle. The other consideration was this wire here. This is like a bicycle brake wire where you have a metal cylinder and a wire, a cable that goes down through the center, and you apply the brakes this way. Well, this footrest, of course, has to swing up and swing out to be removed. So I actually, in addition to putting a couple of holes in the frame here and spacing it out with some collars, I also had to get out the circular grinder and just take a little bit off of this top edge of the footrest so that as it swings up, it will miss the brake handle. And then so it runs here underneath the frame, back under the body, and into the rear bogie. So I swapped the bogies. I decided I put the brake bogie in the rear and the plain bogie in front. That should be fine for the amount of weight that I carry. And that way there's a fair amount of wire and it doesn't have to be harshly looped. And you can see the actuator there applying the brakes, and there's a spring that separates the two pairs of brake shoes when the brakes are not applied. And I'm sure I'll have to tweak this a little bit once I get it out on the track, but that shouldn't be a problem because now the body will come on and off without having to disassemble anything. Wow, we're really getting near the end on this project. Did about 6 coats of this burgundy gloss enamel, and that will match the finish of my electric locomotive as well as the steam engine. And I think the tape-off job to protect the inside worked pretty well. So what's next is I want to do just a little bit of decorative lining on the sides, and then we'll just about be done. So let me get busy on that. Well, let's put all the pieces together. There's our chassis. And there's our finished body, just to provide a little protection down in front. I made a little board that can be replaceable. There's our tray for coal and room for tools or gloves or whatever behind that. And finally, a seat on top. I don't know how well that black is going to work out in the hot sun, but we'll start off with it that way. Well, let's get this thing out on the rails and see how it looks. Well, that's going to wrap up the build on our 4-part series of this engineering car. Rodney and I thank you so much, especially if you joined us for all 4 episodes. We hope that you'll be right back here next time on the Crow's Nest Railroad.